Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the YouTube channel Greco Chess. I'm your host, I'm Harry Lassanen series, and in this video, once again, Puzzle Rush. Until now, we had a few puzzle rushes with the highest score of 50. I think the lowest was 28. Let's see if this time we can do better. What are the rules? We continue solving puzzles as they appear in the chess.com puzzle rush until we get 3 of them wrong. But let's first share the screen with you. And here we are with survival mode. Survival means that we don't have to worry about time limit, 3 or 5 minutes. We can discuss them extensively to show how do we reach a solution. And I'd like to invite the viewers after once a puzzle appears on your screen, please pause the video and try to see if you can do it on your own and then look how we deal with it and what is a solution. And in the comments, you may want to write, how did you fare? How many puzzles were you able to do? And let's start with the first. By the way, usually the first few ones are quite simple. Most of them are 1 or 2 moves checkmate, but as we continue, they become tougher and tougher. And let's start. Let's hit the play button for the first puzzle. Here we are. I think this is a free rook, or at least an exchange. Bishop on f5 can take the rook on b1, but is there anything better? Because if there is a checkmate and we just take the rook, it will be marked as wrong. But I can't see anything better. There is no check anywhere. In fact, the only check is if the queen from f6 goes to d4, but then the pawn from from c3 will grab the queen. That's not what we want. Let's take the rook, and we got it right. It's the first time I remember where puzzle number 1 was not checkmate. Now, but now number 2 it is. Queen from f3 goes to f7, mate. Next one. Queen from e4 takes rook on e1, mate. Next one. Rook from e1 goes to e8. Rook from f7 may go to f8, but we grab the rook and it's mate in 2 moves. Oh, this is typical case of king and rook versus king. The rook from d3 goes to d1 and it's mate. What can we do here? Of course, we don't want to exchange queens. We are a rook down, black is to play. You can see here that it says black who is to play. And also you can see it from the letters and the numbers. If they go from H to A, like here, black is to play. Otherwise, if it's white to play, it will be from A to H. And the numbers the other way around. Queen from E, D5, it goes to D1 check. Ah, yes, here it is. Queen can block it, but then we win the rook. Now, here it is made in 2 moves. Queen from e7 goes to a3 check, king goes to b1, and then queen goes to b2 mate. This is another case of queen and rook collaborating on the 7th rank. Queen from f3 to f7 check, and now from f7 goes to g7 mate. This is, you see what happens when the king is surrounded by too many pieces of the own that block the exit. Queen from d8 goes to d2, and it's mate in 1 move because the king has nowhere to go. This is a case of what is called the royal fork. Royal fork is when queen and king are attacked at the same time. So if the king escapes a check, then we lose the queen. Then the opponent back, not we. Hopefully the opponent loses the queen, not we. We gain the queen. Knight goes to f6 check, and then we get the queen. What can we do here? If queen, what checks do we have? Bishop from c5 can take on e3 check. Of course, if the queen takes back, then our knight will win the opponent's queen. Other than that, the king can go only to g2 or h1. In either case, the rook will go to h2 and its mate. Oh yes, now we just win the queen for... We won the queen for a piece, but we better make sure we don't lose a queen. Yes, there's only one square where the king can go and without losing a queen. Of course, we don't want to block with a queen. We lose a queen. We tried so hard to get it. King goes to e7, yes. What can we do here? What checks do we have? Of course, if the bishop goes from c4 to d5, then either the rook or the knight can take it. But if the rook goes from e6 to a6 check, king goes to b8. And then, important question is then, the knight can go from e7 to c6 check. Yes, and king goes to c8, and then rook goes to a8. What can we do here? What would happen if bishop went from f1 to h3 to check, and the only way to stop it, and only for one move, is the pawn goes from g5 to g4, but then we grab the pawn. Yes. Here, oh la la. This is a case of pawn endings. There is no immediate mate. All we need to do is help one of our pawns promote. On the king side, king is blocking the a and b pawns. On the queen side, we have 4 versus 3. How can we exploit it? We need to create a passed pawn. Currently, none of our pawns is passed. Although we have 4 versus 3 majority, by themselves, they cannot do too much. But we're going to help. Well, first of all, I think I need to apologize. King and queen are the other way around. We A and B is the queen side where the king is blocking them, and on the king side, E through H, we have 4 versus 3 majority. And how can we create a pass pawn? That is a big question. Create a pass pawn and then it can promote. What would happen if the pawn from f5 went to f4? Of course, white needs to take it, otherwise it promotes very easily. If you take it, our pawn goes to e3, but is it fast enough? King goes to b3, pawn to e2, king to c2, and yes, we made it. But we have to calculate because it was only by one move that we were able to do it. In a real game, when it's not a puzzle, this may not work and we may end up losing just because we blindly followed what usually works in puzzles. Yes? Yes, and we did it. 14 out of 15 correct now. This is a case of the back rank. What do we mean by back rank? If the king, in this case, the white king on the first rank, has pawns and are blocking its way in front of it. But it's not easy. We have to be careful. The queen cannot just go to f1, or rook will take it. So the queen goes to f2 check, king h1, queen f1 check, or rook will take it, but then rook takes rook and its mate. Here, be careful, white. If white was to play queen from f6, go to g7, mate. But we don't want this to happen. How can we stop it? We cannot directly stop it, but we can check, because if we check, then white cannot do their mate move. They need to reply the check. How many ways do we have to check? We have 3 ways. Queen can go from b2 to a1, b1, or c1. King goes to h2, and then that is a big question. Then we win the pawn if queen goes to c1 here, and queen to h6, and now there is no mate. It's only a pawn, but what pawn is it? Nice combination. We exchange queens. Knight takes on f7, we want the rook. I hope that this is the answer. Because no matter how tempting is a combination, unless it leads to a mate, there could be something even more rewarding, and our solution will count as wrong. But this was correct. What is happening here? Queen and rook are going to collaborate, but first step is queen goes to h8 to force king to go to e7. Then queen goes to d8 check, king goes to e6, and then queen to e6 should be made. Let's see if this is the case. Yes. In chess, ideally, you want to be able to calculate without seeing, because in a real game, you cannot move the pieces during the game. You're supposed, and ideally, some people may even put their fingers, but you're supposed to do it completely mentally. In serious tournaments, they'll insist on this rule. What can we do here? There is no check for black. Material-wise, if we, yes, we have the same, because if we're ahead, all we need to do is exchange. If we're behind, winning a piece may not be the answer, may only reduce the deficit. If we have the same material, even one piece winning will be wonderful. But how can we win, and what kind of a piece? Doesn't seem so easy. The only thing we can threaten is a knight on h3, but if we push a pawn, the knight has at least two squares, f4 and g1 to escape. Not especially the g1 is not ideal, but that could not be the answer. We have knight from f6 can go either e4 or h5 and threaten the queen. And the question is, and so what? If it goes to e4, queen goes to f3, and then upon forks them anywhere else. If knight goes to e4, what can the queen do? Queen can go or to h5. Let's see which of the two is the correct. Queen, if queen goes to f3, the pawn will fork knight queen. If queen cannot go to g4 because of the bishop on c8, not to h5 or f5. If it goes along this diagonal, the only safe square is e5, but then the pawn can go to f6, threatens the queen once again. And the question is, where can the queen go? I just have the feeling that then the queen is lost. But the question, we have to be careful. Should the knight go on e4 or should it go on h5? In real game, maybe both are correct answers, but in puzzles, we have to be very careful. Usually only one of them is the answer. Of course, e4 is more tempting because the knight is protected. It doesn't hang loose. It's much more tempting to put it to e4 because if queen goes to f3 and by fork we win. Yes, what's going to happen if we put it on h5? Here's a trick. We put on h5, queen goes to f3. The pawn goes to g4 and the queen goes back. So the moment we win the knight, the queen will win a knight. So we don't win anything. So goes to e4. And now we have the fork. Pawn goes to g4. And now we win the knight. If the knight was here, we wouldn't win. We'd just exchange knight. Good. We got 19 correct. Here, this looks like a one-move mate. Queen from e1 goes to e8. The bishop goes to f8. Then our bishop goes to h7 check. King goes, yes, here we are. Here, bishop goes to h7 check. King has to go to h8, and now it's mate. What do we do here? I don't see any check, of course, unless queen from h1 takes to f1, and then king will take a queen. But can we attack the white queen to win the queen? And if so, how? The queen on f6. Where can it go? If white had to move and they could only move the queen, it is safe where it is. It can go to g5. It can go, it can take an, no, not a 5, no, it can go to e5, take the pawn. It can go to f7. Can go to h8, has a lot of squares to go. What if a bishop went to g7? Then the queen can go to g5, and all the other squares are blocked. And then a queen would go to h6, attack again the queen, and queen can go somewhere, but then we win the bishop on c1. Let's see if this is the answer. White would rather sacrifice the queen for 2 pieces. Here, I think, let's see how's the material. We have 3 pieces, the opponent has 4. So we need, if it's not made, and I don't see how it's made because I cannot even see a check, we cannot win any of the black queen or any of the black rooks. What I think the best answer is we take the knight on e5 and then we have a fork. Takes back the bishop, and now we win the knight on f6. Here, what do? I think it's made in one move, and I'm surprised it's so late in the puzzle. Made in one move, number 23. The rook from f4 goes to h4, and it's made because rooks cover the g and the h files. Here, this is a case of weakening the diagonal leading the king. There is a diagonal from h5 to e8, this diagonal here. And the queen, if the queen checks from h5, the pawn blocks it. And now we have to be careful. We just cannot fall to the, no, the queen takes the queen, not the knight. Because if the knight takes it, rook goes to d1 back rank. Yes, we got it. We finished 24, the first 2 rows. No mistakes. What can we do now? This looks like a fork if the pawn goes to e5, but then if queen goes back, and if we take the knight, queen takes through, but we can take another rook, yes. Yes, so we want the extra rook. If it was not for the extra rook, we would get beat even down in exchange. Once again, the weak diagonal leading to the black king from h5 to e8. Queen goes to h5. I think this would be the first move. Let's see what is the follow-up. If queen takes, black will take a queen. And if we had something like a bishop or something like that to deliver a check, perhaps. But now, I think the best we can do is the knight goes to g6, and due to the pin, if the pawn h7 takes g6, then we win the rook. Now, to win the rook or to have a check? If we have a check, it's very tempting to win the other pawn with a check, but I don't see the follow-up. If king goes to d7 or f8. Win the rook. Yes. Let's see the next one. The first move should be either rook goes to g8 or queen goes to f6. And then, if queen goes to f6, I can't see the then because the rook on d8, e8 will take a rook on g8. But if first rook goes here to g8 check, rook takes it, queen checks from f6, rook goes to g7 and then mate. We got it. Here there is a wonderful pin. The pawn on g2 is pinned because of a bishop on b7. So queen will take on h3 safely, and that's it. Again, the same weakened diagonal. Queen will check from h5. Let's see the follow-up after that. We have to be careful. Queen cannot go to h7 because of the knight on h6 that will take a queen. But we can check with a knight from f5. I think now it's mate. We don't take the knight. We just send a queen to h7 now that it's liberated. This is pawn ending oppositions and who knows what. First, we must take the rook. Otherwise, I don't see how not only we cannot win, we cannot even avoid defeat. Yes, we'll force white the opposition. What is opposition? Opposition means that when the kings are facing each other, if your opponent has to move and send the king away, you have the opposition. Otherwise, if you have to move, your opponent has the opposition. And that's where they finished it. It is theory after that, once you get in a position, how you can convert it to a win if the king is in front of the pawn. Now here, white will promote in 3 moves. The pawn goes from h5, h6, h7, h8. Black could perhaps promote in 3 moves, but a third move is a check, so black cannot move. Check. And now we must stop. Until now, this was the easy part. We must stop the pawn from going to g1. How? Because if black was to play, pawn goes to g1. For example, if a king took the pawn on f6, pawn promotes and we have 1 queen each, we don't win. So what do we do? Let's see if we can do anything with checks. If we could place a queen on g1, that's it. But first, let's check from here. Yes. The problem doesn't show the follow-up, and in a game, we need to know the follow-up. You need to put your queen in g1, so then the black king has to stay near the pawn, and then you bring your own king near that. What do we do here? What checks do we have? Of course, the bishop, if it goes to b5, pawn will take it. If the pawn goes here, if the bishop goes to, if bishop goes to g4 check, white needs to stop it, otherwise their queen is steward. If they put the bishop, we take it, because the knight supports it. If we put the pawn, I know what to do. Rook takes bishop, queen takes rook, and then pawn checks. Yes, now rook takes bishop. And they must take the rook, otherwise they lose the queen. Wrong! Got the first wrong. After 31 correct, we have the first wrong. What can we do? That's life. Here it's a combination of a back rank. If queen takes on d2 with a check, rook has to take back. Then arrow goes to g1 from g8 to g1. Check, rook goes down, then it's mate. Yes. We have one wrong, but 32 correct. Let's see how can we do now. We have a check for knight from a8, go to c7, and we want a knight to not to be at the corner, but be near the enemy king. Where can the black king go? Nope, 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 nope. And you know, when you check with the knight, you cannot interfere. You can either take the knight, and here the knight cannot be taken, or move the king, and the king has nowhere to go. Knight goes to c7, mate. We have to reply to check, otherwise either rook or queen can go to f8 and it's mate. But where can we go? We want to go somewhere that there is no check. If we go to g2, queen goes to f1 for black, and well, we can escape again, but they have at least a perpetual, not if we win. If king goes to g4, how can black continue? Queen goes to e2. Now I have to think what to do. Anywhere else can, what other answers does white have to the check? King goes to g4, king goes to g2, queen cannot be taken, no piece can go on e3, and even if it could, you don't, it would be lost by the pawn. So king to g4, yes. Ah, that was it. It was not an easy, so I'm glad that they stopped there. If knight goes to h4 check, king can go only to h6. Rook goes to h5, and I think it's mate. Let's see if this is the case. Yes, rook goes to h5 and it's mate. The bishop on b2 covers g7. Good, 35 correct and 1 wrong, the first 3 rows. Here, the queen from h1, if he checks the black king, but the king has few squares to go, but there are 3 ways to check. Either f1, d1, or b1. What you want to do is constrain the white king as much as possible. For example, if you went to b1, the king would go to c4, and then it is can easily escape. But if you check from b1, the e file is already taken by the rook, so king can only go to c2 or d2. The same thing, if we check from d1, king can go to c4 and escape. Of course, ideally, especially if one has enough time in a real game, you check as much as possible, use as much of your time as possible, because especially this is near the end, so most likely the game will not last too much after that, and it's important that it ends winning for you and not for your opponent. That is why my opinion is that the best way to check is from b1, from f1, so king cannot go there. If it goes to any of these 2 squares, then queen can move to e1 and its mate. Let's see if this is the answer. Yes. What can we do here? If we win the enemy's rook, and we don't win, if we exchange the rooks, because black has a choice to either exchange the rooks, or they don't want to lose the rook, or move it elsewhere. If we exchange them, pawn goes to to e3, attacks the knight, and I think it's unstoppable after that, will be promoted. Yes. If it goes to e2, the knight covers e1. It's not so unstoppable as I thought. So we're going to use the other pawn we have. Here we have to be careful. If we move, because here it is no return. If we move the pawn to h2, we lose the e3. But the pawn on h2 promotes, and we should win. If we move on h2, how can white stop it? If they put the knight on f2, but then a pawn on e3 wins the knight. Yes, that's it. Let's see what are we supposed to do now. Materially, queen, rook, 3 pieces each, and pawns. White has 4 pawns each, so materially we're the same. If we can win anything, it will be wonderful, but not easy. Uh, a bishop on e2 can take the knight on b4, and the queen from d8 can take the knight on d6, but no matter which knight we take, the other knight will take either a bishop or a queen. And if we takes a queen, it's a disaster. If he takes the bishop, at least we're even. We can win easily the pawn on b4 with a knight and attack the queen, but the question is, and so what? Queen will go to plenty of squares. Also, the bishop from g7 can go to h6 and attack the rook on c1, but the rook can go to tons of squares. Again, once, so what? Then we have a back rank, because it seems that the first rank for white is not that well covered. If a bishop e7 takes on b4, knight from d3 takes on b4, and if a knight from d5 takes pawn on b4, queen has to move, but then the queen from d8 cannot go to d1 deliver mate because of the rook covering. If the pawn from f3 goes to g2, queen will take a bishop. If we could place a knight on d3, it's wonderful. We have a pin. No, don't even have a pin. We attack the rook, but that's all. What if queen go? If here we have a double attack. Look what's happened. Queen from d8 goes to g5. It attacks both the rook on c1 and mate on g2. Not easy to see these things. It took us some time, and that's why in a real game we must use as much time as necessary. Once again, let's assume that you play a long game where they give you at least an hour, if not 2 or 3 hours each player. If you win the game, wonderful. Doesn't matter how you use your time, you did great. But if you lose, you want to know at least you used all of your time. It's inexcusable if you lose a game and you have 1 hour on your clock. It means that you did not really try your best. You had 1 hour left on the plate. That is why, but of course, you don't want to reach the ending with no time to think. That's why you must use your time wisely and make sure that at least if you're not winning, you have used all of your time. So queen goes to g5, yes. There's a check. How to reply? Not too many ways to reply. Still, the threats are the same. If we send a rook to f7, the rook goes to c8, and even if the bishop will cover the check, but still, we don't have the double threat. We only have the threat on the g2. That's why king goes to h8. Check with the knight, and now we have to take the knight because otherwise we lose a queen. Here, how do we reply to the check? What we need is make sure, because we don't have the double attack any longer. We don't attack the rook. We want our next move to make sure that we still have the mating threat. If white has a free move, they can easily push their pawn to g3 or g4 and still have a mate if the rook is not on c1. I think the best way is put the rook here on f1, but I'm not sure at all about it. Yes, now we take the bishop, no other answer. And now there's a check and we win the queen. Okay, we finally, white escaped the checkmate, but they lost the queen and they have a completely lost game. What do we do here? Black is near checkmating us. Be careful, the queen on f1. If black had one more move, it goes to g2 and it's mate. So we need to reply definitely, either protecting g2 pawn, which I can't see how. Well, and I could go to h4 and but then black has other ways to attack. Or we need to check. If knight from f3 goes to g5, I can't see. Okay, of course, if the rook goes to h8, check, but we lose the rook. And there's a follow-up check with the knight from e5 to g6. Black replies, and then there's nothing. But what if the knight went from f3 to g5? Check. Black sends king to h6. And if the knight goes to f7, it's mates. One needs some imagination, but let's go through the moves and make sure it is. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not always right. You already had one wrong here, which we'll see later what was the answer. And knight goes to f7. Oh, it's not made yet. You can go to h7. Yes, it's not made. The only square. But we have a follow-up. Rook goes to h8. Here, where to play white has a very nice position. If excuse me, black has a nice position. If rook from g2 could go to e2, its mate. In addition, the rook from e3 attacks a queen on e2. What can we do? We can check if queen goes from e2 to c2, and the answer isn't. So what? We can check with a pawn going from c3 to c4. Almost a mate, but there is the square on c5. Then the pawn can go to b4 check. King goes to b6. Pawn goes to c5. Win at least the rook. This seems very promising, and unfortunately we cannot send the pawn to b4 and second move the pawn goes to c5 because queen goes to e2 and it's mate. So I think we need to start with the pawn going to c4. Yes. Now here we have to be careful with the second move. Pawn goes to b4, king to b6. Yes. Now we have to be careful the third. Yes, there's a nice fork, but we cannot rely on the fork because let's assume a pawn will win the rook on d6 and queen goes to e2 and it's mate for black. But I think we'll be lucky. A queen will help us. Here we are. Pawn goes to b5 check. Pawn will take pawn, and then a queen finally comes out and delivers the mate. Good, we got 40 correct and one wrong. Let's see, can we break the record of 51 here? What happens if queen takes the bishop on g7? Materially, we are way down. Uh, so winning the bishop, even bishop and knight. Let's assume that we get the bishop and then the knight. Is it good enough for us? Will be near, will be an exchange up, but black has this dangerous pawn on b2. I cannot rely on that. But if we check the bishop g7, what can black do? If they send the king to the 8th rank, then we have the rook goes to f8 and it should be made. But what if they send to this, if they put the knight, we win the knight with a check. What if king goes to d6? In addition, we have to be careful. It's not enough that black is way ahead in material. They threaten mate on g2. So we cannot just win the bishop and the knight and feel, at least we got two pieces and we are more or less the same material. No, because then black checkmate on g2. That is why if we take the bishop on g7, king goes to d6, what do we do now? We take the knight, and yes, then we cover the g2. There's no mate, at least we got two pieces. Yes, and now I can't see any useful check. Queen to f8 will be lost from the rook. Queen to a5 will be lost both from queen and king. But if we take the knight and queen from g7 covers, yes, here we are. Black foolishly lost the bishop. Otherwise, they could have continued the game. Here, this looks like the beginning where most likely if it's a puzzle and if white has a winning combination, black fell for an opening trap. If queen goes to d5, the threatened mate on f7. How can black stop it? Unfortunately for them, they already pushed the pawn to h6, so the knight from g8 cannot go to h6 and stop it. Even if it could, there could be other concessions. You don't want that, but at least you stop the mate. Queen cannot go to f7 because bishop will take it. Can queen go to f6? Of course, if knight goes to e5, a knight will take the knight. If queen goes to f6, pawn will be pushed. Knight, knight. I think that should be it. Black can postpone it a few moves, but nope, it's wrong. We got second wrong, 41 correct and 2 wrong. What do we do here? Oh, that's a very tricky one. Queen to h7 check. We sacrifice the queen because rook goes to h6 check, king goes to g8, and rook to h8. Yeah. So we got 42 correct and 3 wrong until now. Let's see how many correct can we do. Can we beat the record of 50? Not easy, because now the puzzles become much tougher, and there are many promising ones like the previous one that I think it had a good continuation, but not the best. If queen goes from c3 to c4 check, and then if pawn goes to a4 check, and then if you exchange queens, you're down by 2 pieces. So this needs to lead to mate or win the queen. And the queen is not easy. It's protected twice, both pawn g7 and knight g8. How can we do check? If queen goes to c4, the king has 2 squares, a5, b6, and no follow-up. If you go to a4, at least it seems there is a follow-up. Yes. What is the next follow-up? The most promising are if queen goes to b4 check, king has only 2 squares, queen b5, it should be made. Yes. Finish 43. What can we do now? Knight is on c2, threatens the rook on a1. I think we have a fork. Queen a4, check, king, and knight. But how are we material? Queen, 2 rooks, and 3 pieces each side. Pawn, 6 for white, 7 for black, if I counted correctly. So black is 1 pawn ahead, but we're going to win the knight. And now we have to take back the bishop. No other way. Good, we did 44. What are we doing here? It seems very promising. Sacrifice the bishop for 2 pawns. Bishop from d6 goes to g3 check. Pawn takes, queen takes. And even if there's nothing more, just winning these 2 pawns for a bishop is not necessarily a bad deal. If then queen goes to g2 check, and no matter where it goes, queen to f2 mate. Let's see if this is the answer. Now here we have queen goes to f2 mate. Good, 45 correct, great. What is the case here? The only check I see is queen from b6 to f2 without any continuation. We just lose a queen for a pawn. Threaten the queen. If knight go from f6 goes to e4, knight will take a queen. Then we can take the bishop from e4 to b5. Then the knight will take a bishop. And then what? Here we are. Knight goes to e4. Knight from g3 takes a knight on e4. Knight here goes to e4. The knight takes a knight. And then if the pawn takes a knight, we have double threat. Both the rook attacks the queen and the bishop attacks the other bishop. Let's see if this is the answer. Yes, yes. And now we win the bishop and we are 1 piece ahead. Nope, wrong. So we did 45 correct. We didn't break the record, but almost there. Let's see what did we do wrong and how to fix them. Let's do the first one. You see the puzzle started with the easiest of 169 rating, and I'm not sure what this means. And 2480, the toughest we did. Almost Grandmaster level. 2510 where we failed. Let's see the first one, the 1711. If I remember correctly, we started with the check and then okay, let's see. Let's try once again. Bishop goes here, check. Yes. Then rook takes bishop check. Yes. No, that was wrong. Let's see the answer. Yes, once again we win the queen, but for a much smaller price. So the second move, instead of rook going to h1, it went to h2. Let's see the second one. This had to do with the opening trap. We put a queen here, yes. No, that's not it. Let's see the solution. Did we first take the pawn or what? First we take the pawn, then the queen checks, then the queen checks and it's mate. Okay. It's not enough for your opponent to fall to the opening traps. You must need to know how to take advantage of them. And let's do the last one. Yeah. I think this was the first move we got it right. With the second right. And the third, we took the bishop. Oh, yes, a queen was hanging. First we take the queen, and then we take the bishop, yes. Otherwise, we got the bishop, we're happy, and then suddenly we lose a queen. So we got 45 correct. Not a record, but not far from the record. That's it for this puzzle. Let's see how things are going otherwise, tournaments. The two tournaments that to follow. My own Greco chess, one game away from the end. You see here that in the final round, 16 players started, 4 are still in the game. And after 11 of the 12 games of the final round, Barack 7 has 5 points versus 4 of Maxim Govorucha. Third place is my skin, 1.5, and I'm the fourth one with half point. And everything is depending on the last game where Maxim Govorucha has white and Barack 7 has black. If Maxim Govorucha wins, they tie with 5, and then I'll have a meeting with the two of them, a private meeting to see how to resolve the tie. If Barack 7 can get at least a draw, he's the Greco chess champion. Let's see the other one, that is the Moonlight Underwater, that is organized by one of our subscribers from Italy. And it's in round 2. 81 players finish the first round. 28 are in round number 2, Underwater Moonlight, the Nine Moons tournament. And you see what's happening. We are continuing in Group 1. Maxim Govorucha with 9 points is very near advancing. Not completely mathematically given, but he's leading with 9 points. Group 2, Piggio74 from Italy leads with 7 points. Group 3, Iraq Lion from Iraq. And I think Iraq Lion has guaranteed advancing because 9.5 points. Maybe Chinanfu or Steam Rocket can pass him, but still as third, Iraq Lion will advance. In Group 4, a little bit similar situation. Lysithia Vantres from Japan has advanced with 9 points because the only people that can pass Lysithia Vantras is the second and third, Vivaldi Vies and Viken Varans. But even as third, Lysithia Vantres will advance. And that's it for now. Thanks to all the viewers for watching. We have more and more views after every video. The subscribers, we have more subscribers. And if you have not yet subscribed, please click the subscribe button, consider doing so. The likes, we have quite a lot of likes. And the comments, I have some comments and some suggestions. We'll try to see if we can implement them. Once again, this is the Greco Chess channel. I'm Harilos Aniziris, and assuming nothing extraordinary happens, meaning either we finish what extraordinary can happen. If, for example, the Greco Chess Championship is over, the last game finishes, or if I hit one of my milestones in my online games, we'll continue with the next bot. Let's see which one is going to be. Let's share the screen and let's look at the next bots on the list. Play bots. Here we are. The next one, as you see here, is Antonio from Paraguay with a rating of 1500. We eliminated, not very easily, but we eliminated Wendy from Canada. Now it's Antonio from Paraguay, the second bot with 1500, advanced ones. Then there is Pierre from France with 1500. And then we go to the 1600 bots. Let's see how far can we go. Yes, now we stumble once in a while, but we continue. This is the Greco Chess channel. I'm your host, Karilaos Aniziris, and for now, goodbye.